Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus. I'm honored to be joined today by retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Joe Peterburs. And sir, thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
He's a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, more than 36 years in uniform to our country. Sir, let's begin with where you were born and raised.
Well, I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota on the 25th of November, 1924. I'll be 95 next month. And however, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, we moved from Minnesota to Wisconsin. This is, of course, just prior to the Depression. And the Depression, and job opportunities were better there for my father. So we moved to Wisconsin. I grew up in suburb, West Allis, Wisconsin. Went to Catholic school there for St. Holy Assumption, and was a top-notch server at Mass and stuff. And I had a vocation to become a priest. And after graduating from grade school, that we called it at that time, I went into the seminary, St. Ignatian's, Wisconsin, the Salvatorian Seminary, and started my long journey to become a priest.
What happened?
Well, 7th of December, 1941 happened.
Right.
I was coming back from, at the seminary, coming back from Sunday Mass over to the gym to play some pool with my buddies, and the pool was in the basement, and there was a staircase going down, and a speaker right on top of the staircase, and about halfway down the stairs, the announcement came across saying the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, and we were going to war. And at that time, I knew I'd be leaving the seminary and joining the military.
Wow. Why did you choose the Air Corps?
Well, it was the quickest way to get a commission, and I had no previous background or inclination toward aviation, but I'd watched all the old movies, World War I movies, and I really loved the aviation movies, Dawn Patrol and things like that. And I thought that would be a good way to go. So anyway, I did leave the seminary at the end of the semester. I was 17 at the time, and I tried to get into the Navy, but because they were taking recruits at 17, and I failed the eye exam, and so I'd heard that carrots were good for your eyes, so I started eating bushels of carrots. And then on my birthday, 25th of November of 1942, I took the competitive exam for aviation cadet acceptance, and I passed that, and was sworn in on the 30th of November as an aviation cadet.
So you failed the Navy eye test, but the Air Corps was perfectly...
Well, by that time, I guess all those carrots...
The carrots paid off.
Yeah,
they actually
paid
worked.
Off.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So where did you train, and what did you fly in training?
Well, I started out with primary training and with the PT-17, the Stearman, the biplane, open cockpit. Got soloed in, I think it was 6 hours, a little under 6.5 hours. And got about 65 hours in the Stearman, and then went on to basic. And basic was the PT-17, which was a metal aircraft, and a single wing, and but not retractable gear. And got about 85 hours there, and I got set back a class because there was no room in the advanced at that time, so we had to wait another month before we could go into advanced training, and went to advanced training in Dothan, Alabama, flying the Stearman. I'm not the Stearman, the Texan, the AT-6, and graduated as a second lieutenant fighter pilot on the 15th of April 1944 at 19 years old.
Amazing, amazing. So you arrived in England in November of 44, is that
That's
right?
correct. After graduating, we went to what we called an RTU, a replacement training units, and I was flying P-40s. I got about 150 hours in the P-40, and then I got my assignment to England and was assigned to the 20th Fighter Group, 55th Fighter Squadron, flying P-51s. I checked out in the P-51 and got about 20 hours. I flew the B, C, and D models, and then after about 20 hours, I was combat ready and started flying combat.
Wow. I've heard from other pilots that the P-51 was their favorite plane compared to the ones that came before it.
Oh, yes, yes. Actually, the group that I went to had P-38s, and they had just converted to the P-51. And of course, it was a little more difficult for the 38 pilots because they had no torque. They had the twin-engine counter-rotating props, and the 51 had a lot of torque, and it was a difficult aircraft to transition to if you had no prior. But the group that I went with, and there were 7 of us that had went training together, and we all arrived at the 20th at the same time. And it was from the P-40 to the P-51 was really no problem.
When did you first enter combat?
I had my first mission on the 12th of December, 1944, and it was a routine escort mission. And I flew 48 more missions, and the last of which was my 49th, and the most exciting. I had a lot of really good missions. I loved the strafing part of it. Our primary mission was to escort the bombers, of course, to protect them to and from the target. However, we did have fighter sweeps sometime, and then we also had some, depending upon the combat environment, we would be allowed one squadron of the group would be allowed after the bombers hit the target, would be allowed to go down and look for targets of opportunity. And that's what I loved, the strafing things. And I was nicknamed the strafing kid. So
I like it. I like it. Did you see much resistance in the air from the Germans by that point?
yes, there were. I think it was the 14th of January. We had put up, the 8th Air Force had put up about a little over 2,000 B-7 bombers and 900 fighters for targets in central and eastern Germany. And this was my first encounter. And we were hit by some 300 plus 109s and 190s. And it was really bombers being shot down. The German tactic was that the 109s would come in and hit and run, hoping to draw the fighters chasing them, and drawing them away from the bomber protection. And then the 190s would be circling up, and after the 109s went through, the 190s would come down and chew up the bombers. So we had a lot of losses of B-17s that day. And of course, there was engines and wings and parachutes in the air, and you had to worry about not hitting somebody. And then you had the other fighters coming in. And I had a head-on with a 109. It was coming at me, and I was basically chicken, and we were headed towards each other. And my flight leader, he was on the tail of the 109, but he couldn't fire because he may have hit me. So we passed about 50 feet. I passed about 50 feet under him, and as soon as I left, I got some hits on his wings, but nothing enough to destroy it. But after I'd passed under, my flight leader, he zapped him and got him. So that was my first encounter. But it did remind me of how brave the B-17 pilots were. I mean, they would just plow in there 150, 160 knots onto the target, flak all around. You hear the expression, the flak was so thick you could walk on it. Well, that was how it was. And they'd have their bombers, their buddies going, falling from the left into the right, and they would be on to the target. Now, I thought then that they're the bravest of the brave.
It's a very, very perilous job.
Yes, right.
And at one point, even didn't have the fighter escorts.
That's correct. That's when the 51 came into its the savior, basically.
Absolutely.
I mean, they were able to. My longest mission was 7 hours and 20 minutes.
Wow.
And my longest combat day was 9 hours when we were crossing Remagen Bridge. I was doing I did 2 fighter sweeps missions that day over the bridge and protecting the forces. Okay, I'd flown the 30th of March and the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and my 49th mission the 10th of April. And the Air Force had put up, 8th Air Force had put up a force of about 1,500 bombers and again about 900 or so fighters, and they were bombing targets in the Magdeburg, Berlin, Potsdam, and Oranienburg areas. And as we approached the target, we rendezvoused near Magdeburg, and then the box of bombers that we were escorting were about 450 with about 90 fighters. And our group had the high cover, flying about 6,000 feet above the bombers. And our target was Oranienburg, which is just north of Berlin. And it was uneventful until we got over the target. And then just about the time the bombers were letting go their loads, we were hit by a swarm of ME-262s. And I visually latched onto a ME-262 turbojet fighters. And I latched onto one, and he blew up a B-17. And I, of course, as soon as I saw him, I rolled over and started at him. And he pulled into another B-17 just about the time I was getting there and blew it up. And then I got onto his 6 and was able to get his left engine. I got some hits in his left engine. I saw a little smoke and a little flame. But he rolled over and started down to the deck. And I chased him. And, of course, I was losing my speed advantage because I had the speed advantage because of my altitude. I had 6,000 feet on him and throttles wide open and going down. Anyway, in fact, I almost hit compressibility, which would have been bad. But anyway, he went down and disappeared at about 3,000 feet. He disappeared into some clouds. And 60 years later, I found out who this guy was, and it all came but anyway, he told me that after he went into the clouds, he made a 90-degree turn, and then his engine started disintegrating, and he had to bail out. Anyway, of course, this is all unknown to me. So I've break off. I'm not going to follow him into the clouds. It's fruitless. So I pull off, and I look over, and I see an airfield just loaded with aircraft. Well, what does a 20-year-old do with a 2,000 horsepower engine and a 650 caliber machine gun? So I decided to start strafing, and I made 5 or 6 passes. I can't remember, but in the process, I destroyed at least 5 aircraft at the ground, and that started a hangar on fire. And of course, I'm by myself, so all the guns are at me. And I got a couple hits in the wing, which didn't affect the aircraft. So I come around for my last pass, and it's a ME-200, a Condor, big four-engine part of Hitler's fleet, which, in fact, I found out later it was part of Hitler's fleet. And I came in on it, and I felt a thud as I was coming in. And I fired it, blew up, and I was pulling off, and I felt another thud. And then I started getting an oil stream across my windscreen. I got up to about 10,000 feet. And I was able to, by manipulating the throttles and mixtures, the technical stuff, that I was able to keep it sort of flying. So I decided to head back to the west. The east was closer, the Russians were closer, but I felt that my chances were better if I went to the west. So I started back towards Magdeburg, which was about 90 miles away, and slowly losing altitude. And by the time I got to a little town called Berg, which is probably 15, 20 miles from Magdeburg, I was down to 1,000 feet. And I decided, I'm going to have to bail out. So I unstrapped my stuff. And just as I'm unstrapping my stuff, I look off to my 3 o'clock position. And there's a 190 coming in at me. So I've been able to turn my aircraft. By this time, my aircraft is starting to burn. I turn into him, and he fires his rockets and misses. And by the time I complete the turn, I'm down to 500 feet. I think, gee, I'm too low to bail out. and so I'm looking for a place to land. And then, of course, this is all milliseconds, taking place. I think, well, I'm unhooked. I'll kill myself if I try to bail in. I'm not strapped anymore because I unhooked to bail out earlier. So I decided to bail out. So I'm over to the side about 350 feet. I figured I let loose of the aircraft, and I have to go out to the wrong side. You go out to the right because the torque would throw you away from the aircraft, but the right side was burning. So I have to go out to the left side. So I go out to the left side, and as published, I hit my knee on the horizontal stabilizer and then pulled my ripcord, the chute opened, I swung once, it hit the ground hard. And it was, fortunately, it was a spring, and it was a big farmer's field. And it banged up my back a little bit and my legs, but I had burns on my arms and legs. So I get up to see what the situation is, and I'm in this middle of a farmer's field, nothing, no trees, nothing for 100 yards all around. And I also see about 10, 15 farmers come rushing at me with their, and about the time they are just probably 20 yards away, a motorcycle comes tearing up behind me, and a Luftwaffe sergeant, the German Air Force sergeant who's stationed in the area, got off his motorcycle, took out his Luger, fired a couple of shots in the air, and held the crowd off. And about the same time, a group of big mucky-mucks from the town, probably the Burgermeister, and I know the chief of police and several others, and they were talking to the Luftwaffe sergeant, and he agreed to let them take me into town to start questioning me and this sort of thing. And so that's what we went into town, went into probably the local city hall building, and started questioning me. And the chief of police was probably a World War I guy. I remember this like it was just, and he had a right hand that was a black leather hand. I don't know if you've seen some of the old movies in the 40s, but that's how they always were depicted. And he had a green uniform and a real leather funny hat. I knew he was a police chief. And he pulled out his Luger and wanted to shoot me on the spot. And the Luftwaffe sergeant, no, none of this. And the crowd was starting to gather and making a ruckus outside. The sergeant said, "We're going." So he takes me to the local airfield that he was stationed at, which was probably 20, 25 minutes away. And so I put in the brig there and questioned for a day and a half of Gestapo questioning. No physical stuff, just relentless questioning. And during the 2-3 days I was there, the British were bombing, doing their night bombing at this time. And I was sitting there in the bomb shelter with all these Germans. And they were getting the hell bombed out of them. So, it wasn't very comfortable. Anyway, after about, I think it was on the third day, they took me to the rail station and put me on a train to Stalag 11, another POW camp. It was all British. And as I was standing there waiting for the train to put me on a train, one of the workmen at the station, he handed me a bottle of schnapps and gave me a swig, and I'd never tasted shit. And it was a pick-me-upper. Anyway, I hopped on, I was put on the train and ended up at Stalag 11, and there was only about 200 prisoners left because they had moved out the the main body of the prison camp, several thousands. And there were about 200 British Tommies there. And then I spent the night. The next morning, we started a forced march back towards Berlin. And it was about 5 days, 4 or 5 days on the march, and it was just pandemonium. It was thousands of people going east and thousands of people going west. The roads were clogged, motorcycles, German, military up and down, trying to get some kind of sense out of the pandemonium. Vehicles, German army vehicles stopped and stalled and this sort of stuff. And in addition, we were being strafed every day by my buddies out there. They didn't know, of course, that we were POWs in the group. But anyway, we ended up at Luckenwalde, Stalag 3, which is mostly Russian POWs. And Luckenwalde is just outside of Berlin. So I'm there for probably 3-4 days, and I decided to escape. And by escape, I mean it was minimal security at the prison. Basically, just had to go under the fence, and so I did that and went down, started down a road, and probably 5 miles down the road, I heard this rumbling, and I hide in the ditch and look up, and there's a Russian tank in it. And so I jump out and I wave him down, and the little I could communicate with him. And fortunately, the guy that was the lieutenant that was in charge of the column could speak a little English, and I basically told him I American pilot. And he said, yeah, come on. And he gave me a rifle and said, hop on. And I hopped on the tank, and then we started towards Wittenberg. We fought the Battle of Jitterbug. I went on several patrols with the Russians at Jitterbug. And then,
what's it like fighting for another country's army, even though that you're on the same side of the war?
Right.
But it's got to be a little bit weird.
Well, it was more than weird because these guys were wild. There's one instance, we went into a large housing complex, and it was really, really nice, and the sergeant that was leading the patrol, we get into this room, and it's furnished real nice. So he tells us all to get out. We get out, and he stands in the middle of the room with his burp gun and just stands in a circle, laughing like hell, just shooting the thing up like, why? I better watch myself here. I didn't say anything.
Not how the Americans would do it.
Yeah. But anyway, then we started on the thing, and we had an interesting. I think it was probably 8 days by the time we got to Wittenberg, and the battle had just subsided in Wittenberg, and but we had several skirmishes on the way, which was okay. And then at Wittenberg, of course, at this time there's some political tensions between the East and the West, and I felt sort of like I was being secured or watched over a little more than necessary and usual. Then when the American patrol came across to meet the Russians at the Elbe at Wittenberg, they had me sort of hidden way in the back. However, the sergeant in charge of the American patrol, he saw this flight suit back there, and he knew that was an American flight suit. So he started discussing, and they had a little argument, but then he finally released me to the patrol. So I returned from the with the group, the patrol, the American patrol, and they were stationed at Halle, and Halle used to be a major Luftwaffe base. And then from there, I went out on several patrols with the army, and just rounding up munitions. We'd go to a town and have them all piled all there in the town square, and I picked up some really nice souvenirs. And then back, and I was probably there for 3 days with the army, and I got ticked off because they were getting me drunk and winning all my souvenirs. Anyway, I'm 20 years old now, still 20, and I decided, well, I don't know, I'm going to try something else. So I said, sayonara, and take off and walk probably 6, 7 miles, and see the C-47 in a field, and a bunch of guys dressed in striped suits, the striped prisoner suits, and I walk over to the 2 lieutenants who were flying the C-47 and said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Well, we're returning these political prisoners to Paris." And I said, "Oh, Paris, that sounds good." So big mistake. I said, "Can I have a ride?" Yeah. And so we get to Paris, and I immediately get stamped and loused and all that sort of stuff, and I'm back under control. So my days wandering were over. And so I go through a bunch of processing and this sort of stuff, and end up on a convoy back to the U.S., and I land in New York on the 1st of June, back to Fort Sheridan on the about the 6th of June, and then home to marry my lovely fiance, Josephine, who I'd named my aircraft after, so we make all the preparations. But I had to get my mom's permission to get married because I hadn't turned 21 yet. So.
But you did.
Yes.
And so you are married. And one of the things I want to get to is what happened to you in Korea. But I want to skip ahead by about 60 years, because you mentioned that you eventually found out who the pilot of the ME-262 was. Mm-hmm. So explain what it was like to meet that person so many years later.
Well, the background was that there was a 13-year-old boy at Berg hiding in the ditch watching all the air battles like you would expect. And he saw all the action at Berg. Where I bailed out the 190 attack and this sort of stuff. And of course, Berg is in East Germany, and they weren't able to do anything, of course, until research or interaction with the West until reunification of Germany. And then when that happened, then there were a lot of they were trying to catch up. Of course, a lot of TV programs were doing commercials.
Programs.
Yeah, about recovering the aircraft that were lost during World War II. And so Werner, his name was Werner Dietrich, he went to the TV and said, hey, I know exactly where, he told him the story, where this aircraft. So he got the TV company, went ahead and did a special, and they got their big old backhoes and their big metal detectors and stuff, and they found it. And they excavated my aircraft, Josephine. And for 18 months, Werner was trying to locate the pilot. Eventually did in '97. And I got a letter from him saying, explaining. He says, "Was that you?" He said, "I said," wrote back. And of course, he didn't have a computer, so it was all snail mail. And so I wrote back. I said, "Yeah, everything's. I'm sure that was my aircraft." So then I get a call that the TV station wanted to do a follow-up of the excavation, and it wanted me to come to Germany. And my wife had a stroke, and I was a sole caregiver, and I said, no, I can't leave it. So the whole crew packed up with Werner, and they came over to Colorado Springs, where they did the follow-up. During the follow-up, talking to Werner, all he knew was he saw me bail out at Bern. He didn't know where the action. And then I tell him the story about the 262 and this sort of thing, and he said, "I'm going to go when I go back. I'm going to find that 262 pilot." And they go back, and about 2 months later, I get a letter from him saying, "Eureka! I found him. It's Walter Schuck, top German ace with 206 confirmed victories, 198 of them in the 109 and 8 of them in the ME-262. And I said, yeah, okay. And he says, yeah, everything seems to jive. And I said, well, I'll give it a 50%, the fog of war and all that. I said, I'll give a 50% chance. So I took it with a grain of salt. And then a couple of years later, I get an email from this Swedish researcher and author, Christer Bergstrom. And he's in the process of writing Walter Schuck's biography. And he said, I understand that you, after the war, you wrote down a narration of that last mission. I said, yeah. He said, would you mind sending it to me? I said, okay. I sent it to him. 3 days later, I get an email back saying, definitely 100% sure you're the one that shot down Walter Schuck. I said, well, how can you be 100%? He said, everything jived perfectly, all the timing and everything, and places and where you were. And I said, yeah, but I'll maybe 90% of it, still not positive. He says, yes, positive, because you, in your narrative, not knowing anything about Schuck or anything else that's going on, you say that you see this ME-262 shoot down 2 bombers. Well, in fact, Walter Schuck is the only person, the only pilot, the only 262 pilot that shot down 2 B-17s in a row during that mission. In fact, he shot down 4 because he had shot down 2 in an earlier box that he attacked, and then he came over to your box and shot. He said 100%. So I accepted it, and in May they were doing Walter was coming to the United States, and he was visiting an old mate from the Luftwaffe who had migrated to the States in the 50s. Anyway, they were coming to visit him. So I went on the 18th of May, 2005. We met in Vista, California for the second time. And we had an immediate
rapport
with him. And we became close friends, and for the next, until he parted in 2000 and 16. He was 4 years older than I, and so he was 94 when he passed away, and I'm 94 now, so it's 4 years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
Do the math. But anyway, we did many air shows, and I visited his home in Germany, and he visited me in California, and we had a great time. And a lot of he told me all his tactics and this sort of thing during the whole war. And he was really a gentleman. He was known as the Eagle of the North. He did most of his kills in the Izmir, which is the North Sea area. They were stationed out of a base up in northern Sweden and northern Finland, and they were interdicting the traffic, a lead-lease sort of stuff that was entering Murmansk. And so he had 100, and most of them were Russians, 198 and 109. And then he was transitioned to the 262, the turbojet. And on his first mission, he destroyed 3 aircraft. On his first training mission. So anyway, he was a great guy. After the war, I went into administrative type jobs, and was just flew for proficiency, and so I flew B-25s and T-6s and C-47s and stuff like that, all no fighters, and in 1951 I got orders to Korea. And arrived, and actually they at the 18th Fighter Bomber Group at Busan, Korea, and I had been a finance officer prior to getting my orders, accounting and dispersing, and the commander, General Rogers, knew that I had 2 brothers killed in the war, and he didn't want me to fly combat, and I was very, very upset about that. And so after some, he was sort of basing it on the Sullivan thing, where they, and I told him, I said, look at that is for the last surviving son, that you can exercise that, but not. I still have several brothers left. So anyway, he relented, and I checked out in the 51. I got 5 hours or something in it, and then it started my first combat mission with bombs and rockets and stuff. And I'd never fired a rocket, never dropped a bomb. So anyway, that must have been, my instincts were pretty good. So I did a pretty good job on that mission, and flew 76 missions. A couple of them battled them, but I got one mission which I got a 50 caliber right through the prop. I didn't know it, and I didn't know it was through the prop. I got this big flash in front of me, and then my aircraft started just vibrating like heck. And so I didn't know if I'd have to bail out or not. But our base was only about 50 miles from the DMZ, and this was in a punch bowl just across the DMZ. So I made it back to base and landed and taxied into my space and turned off the engine, and the pop, poop, poop, and there the blade is, and a big 50 caliber hole right in the blade.
Wow.
So I thought, oh, that's okay. And then another mission, I was leading a flight of 4 with napalm against enemy troops dug in along in trenches along a mountain ridge. So we went ahead, we had napalm and rockets, so we did a good napalm run. And then came in for the rocket run, and of course, nothing was guided. You had to, you had to have your aircraft straight and level because the rocket will go as your aircraft is going, and if you're at a slip, the rocket will slide. Anyway, you had to go. I popped off my first 2 rockets. And I was popping off my third, and I got small arms cut through the wing root, blew the canopy, and big explosion inside the cockpit. I reach up, and my face is full of blood. My hand's full of blood. So I don't know what the heck's going on. So my wingman, I wobbled him. He lost his radio during the thing, so I couldn't communicate with him. So I communicated back to the home base, and not knowing what the extent of my damages, said I was coming back, and I wobbled my wingman in, and he come pulling in next to me. And so we went back and got the base. So we go to the base and we peel off, and my big wingman peels off before I do, and he comes in and lands, and all the meat wagons are down there. The fire engine began following him. So I land, and no fanfare or anything. And so I taxi to my parking slot, and crew chief jumps up on the wing. I'm down getting my maps and stuff off the floor, and he said, and he is startled and slips off the wing, almost breaks his leg. But what happened, of course, when the projectile went through the canopy, plexiglass, it splattered. So my face was just full of plexiglass, and so I had several hours with the flight surgeon picking that out of my face, and then I flew, I think, 2 days later, so I was back flying again. So that was Korea.
Korea. We could talk about Vietnam if we had the time. Joe, it's been an honor to meet you, sir. You were telling us before we started, 36 and a half years of service in uniform to our country. Thank you very much for your service.
It was my pleasure to serve and do it all over again.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We're grateful for your service. United States Air Force Colonel, retired, Joe Peterburs. This is Veterans Chronicles.